The Star Wars sequel trilogy came out recently, and I love Star Wars. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time. Naturally, when something new comes out, I want to talk about it. I want to give my thoughts and opinions and let people know what I think. But you might not know there's a little bit of a civil war going on in the Star Wars community right now. A little bit of inner turmoil, if you will. And this is caused by a whole bunch of stuff, but, you know, politics and every other fucking thing happening right now. It's hard to give your opinion and not catch some flack for it. Well, before you crucify me as a crying man baby, I'm going to attempt to criticize these films in a way that most people can agree with. I'm gonna be the galactic Abe Lincoln trying to bring us all together. But before we start in with all that negative stuff, I'd like to highlight some of the more positive things that I like about these movies. Because I do like a few things. One of them being the visuals. These are very pretty movies to watch. They look good on the big screen. All of the money that was thrown at these movies, they're bound to look decent, but they look beautiful. They are absolute paintings. Every single frame. You could hang on a wall and it would just be like, wow, that's awesome. But they're pretty movies, and they have giant set pieces in these gorgeous locations with pretty people in them. So yeah, they look great. Second is the music. John Williams has been bringing it for 40 years. The man is still kicking ass after 40 years in this series. And he's in his 80s now. It's impressive that he's even still breathing, let alone composing amazing scores. And then we come to Finn, which is by far the most compelling thing we've had in Star Wars for, 20 years. We've seen Jedi, we've seen rogues, we've seen wanderers, but we haven't seen defectors. Just the massive amount of storytelling potential when someone flips sides is great. Like, I went to see that movie and I was so excited just to see what they were going to do with him. A stormtrooper turned rogue. That's awesome. But unfortunately, friends, now it's time to talk about the things that I thought they could have done better.
I have a really bad feeling about this.
Man, it is a shame what has happened to some of these characters. And I think we can all agree that in the very beginning, before anything went down, some of them were very compelling. And I don't have the time to go through the entire franchise and figure out how every character got shafted, but I can highlight a few of them for you. Now let's start out with Captain Phasma. Think back to when the promotional materials for The Force Awakens were circulating, and not knowing whether Kylo Ren was the main antagonist or Captain Phasma, because Captain Phasma seemed really menacing. To me, almost more menacing than Kylo Ren was. She had this sort of Darth Vaderness about her. I don't know, maybe being all chrome and stuff is what set it off for me, but that was really cool. We've never seen a chrome stormtrooper before. It's always been white or black or brown. This was something special. This was unique. And then you hear that she's being played by Gwendolyn Christie. From Game of Thrones, back when it was good, before the creators decided to see how far they could stick their heads up their own ass. And you have the making for a really great character. It turns out that she's more of like a mini boss that's Finn's main antagonist. And that's where things start to fall apart a little bit. Because in The Force Awakens, she gets beaten by a trash compactor, which not only doesn't give Finn the emotional payoff of truly beating what was his immediate superior, but also the audience no longer sees Phasma as a true threat. But don't worry, don't fret, dear viewer, because she does come back in the sequel to go head to head with Finn once again. And she's dead. She's dead. She just dies. Finn doesn't even land a killing blow. She just falls to her death. There's no awesome special ops stormtrooper badassery. There's no satisfaction for Finn. This didn't happen to her once, but this happened to her twice. This character was utterly wasted. Justice for Phasma. On to the next one. Very quickly, Maz Kanata is set up as this sort of Yoda stand-in. This wise old ugly thing that kind of directs our heroes to where they need to go. She has this air of mystery to her that makes her intriguing, and you want to know exactly what her backstory is, what her history is. Very much like Yoda before the prequels came out.
Where'd you get that?
A good question. For another time.
And in that first film, she has a fair amount of stuff to do, not a lot, but she certainly contributes to the story in a meaningful way. But then she's relegated to being just a peripheral character with no meaning absolutely whatsoever. She's a hologram in the second one, whose plan fails because Rose and Finn are completely incompetent. And in the final film, her job is essentially just to make Princess Leia make sense, because unfortunately Carrie Fisher passed before filming. I always felt it was a shame that they took Lupita Nyong'o and put her behind this. I mean, she's an Oscar-winning actress. I don't know, man. I thought she deserved better. And then we get to Finn. Can we all just collectively apologize to John Boyega for what those fuck puppets at Disney did to his character? I mean, he had so much potential. It sucks to have him just sidelined for the rest of the trilogy. In Force Awakens, he had an actual part, but for the rest of the series, he just essentially does one thing. And I'm not gonna do it. Okay, one. But that's it, because it's been done too many damn times. And it goes without saying that Disney minimizing Finn in almost every promotion for Chinese audiences, because Chinese audiences have a problem with dark skinned people, is abhorrent. The things they're willing to do to get the Chinese dollar is really despicable. I don't know, man. I could go on for days about how these characters have been underutilized at best and destroyed at worst, like DJ from Last Jedi being a completely superfluous character that had no impact on the story at all, or Poe Dameron's character shift wildly between films, and Rose being a big part of The Last Jedi and seemingly forgotten about in The Rise of Skywalker. There's plenty to go over, but we'll be here all day if we do, so on to the next section. Imagine for me, if you will, it's 1999. You're sitting in the movie theater playing your Game Boy Color and drinking Surge, waiting for the film to start. And after an hour and 51 minutes of trade disputes and treaties and all that crap, you see this. And you have no idea how much it's about to blow your damn mind. So I think it goes without saying how high the bar was raised by the prequels for great lightsaber combat. The choreography was impeccable, the action was fast paced, and you felt that there was a real sense of risk. Seeing Jedis at the height of their power, and their abilities almost seemed superhuman, to move with such speed and precision without any sense of danger at all. It makes you think, man, there's no way in hell that I could do that. So when Disney released the sequels, I was very excited for what they'd come up with next. But unfortunately, as it turns out, there isn't a lot of lightsaber combat in the sequels at all. And the combat that is there isn't very good. Many people would counter with this scene from The Last Jedi, the throne room scene, which happens to be the largest combat set piece in the entire trilogy. But it turns out this choreography isn't very good either. Like, look at this guy. What's he doing? He's swinging for the wrong dude. If you watch it close enough, you can see how messy the whole thing actually is. Every fighter is telegraphing their movements way in advance, the parries and holds don't make a lot of sense at all, and the scene's speed is augmented through the editing. It feels like a barrage of cuts, instead of one long shot that lets you absorb the action organically. Needless to say, I was pretty disappointed after coming off the high that was the prequels, where in every fight scene they tried to go bigger than they did in the previous film. And you would think after all the money that they threw at these movies, they'd be able to manage one large, fighting set piece to really just blow your mind. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like it's a giant missed opportunity. Though while we're on the subject of combat, I have one more point I'd like to bring up, and it's a giant pet peeve of mine. Ever since Disney took over Star Wars, lightsabers don't seem very dangerous, do they? Like, when was the last time somebody lost a limb? Where's the dismemberment? I watched all three films in preparation for this video, and I can only find two instances where anything got actually cut off of a person. One is where Snoke gets cut in half, and two, this rando Praetorian guard who loses a head. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment. And let me be clear, to me, that doesn't count. You can't just cut up some rando or some CGI monstrosity and expect me to care. I want you to decapitate the people I know and love. The previous films always reveled in it when they de-armed or de-headed some poor bastard. I miss that sense of danger that lightsabers used to bring. Like when you watch A New Hope after you've seen every other movie and realize that Obi-Wan just hands him this death sword, realizing at any second he could just ignite it through his damn forehead. Like, tell him what it does! The problem's gotten so bad it's even spilling into the video games. Look, this guy should be slicing and dicing stormtroopers, but instead it looks like he's beating them to death with a baseball bat. I hope I'm not alone in saying, let's bring back gory, needless violence to Star Wars. Now let's be clear. Disney didn't drop the ball. They waffle stomped it into the ground. It's plain to see they didn't have an end-to-end story in mind when they started production, and I find this baffling since this is the company that pioneered the MCU. Who would have thought that giving each individual director complete creative control over their own film wouldn't work within a serialized narrative? It seems obvious to me that the faults with this series lies with the directors and the obsession with subverting expectations. And I get it, surprise is what draws people back to the theaters. And OG Star Wars was built on a historic cinematic reveal, so I can see how it's natural to want to replicate that. But not in place of story. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it's actually good to validate your fans' expectations instead of subverting them. It gives them the sense that they know the character, that they understand his choices and what he would do next. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against subverting expectations, but when you do it just for the sake of doing it, you can outright destroy characterization, and that makes it hard for fans to understand the characters and bond with the franchise. You can do it, just don't sacrifice story. So I mentioned Marvel earlier, and I'd like to bring them up again because I want to make something very clear. Star Wars isn't Marvel. I can't think of a quicker way of losing respect from die-hard Star Wars fans than this. There are some fans that hate this trilogy for the singular reason of the forced Marvel-esque humor. And I understand that. It worked in Marvel because you started from the ground up. We expect things like that from those characters because we've been conditioned to expect it. But you can't bring that into an already existing ecosystem when it doesn't work. And of course, I'm not saying that there isn't any humor in Star Wars. Star Wars can have humor. Star Wars can be funny, but not at the expense of the tension. This is even a growing criticism in Marvel movies, that any weight developed in a scene can easily be killed by some stupid-ass joke. Let the comedy be organic, let the humor be natural. Maybe let your actors ad-lib a little bit. That's how a lot of good comedy gets created. All I'm saying is ease up a little bit on the stupid jokes, okay? And also, a sidebar here. Can we ease up on the shameless merchandising a little bit, please? Like, I know that Star Wars has a long history of merchandising, and good for them. Trust me, I've bought my fair share of Star Wars toys. But these attempts at merchandising are shameless and intrusive. Take this trooper, for example. He's a regular stormtrooper with just a little bit of black on him. That's so they can use the same molds from the original toys and paint them a different color. And then there's this guy with this cool new speeder. Except it doesn't make sense in a world where speeders hover over the ground. Why in the hell would you need something with treads on it? And this cool new trooper comes with his own lightning stick. Lightning stick sold separately. All I'm saying is that sometimes the merchandising can be just as, or even more, intrusive than the humor. Moving on. Now, this wouldn't be a criticism video about the sequel trilogy if I didn't mention continuity. Now, any large sci-fi franchise worth its salt will eventually violate its own canon. But some of the creative choices that Disney has taken in this trilogy has outright broken Star Wars. Like, remember the rule of two?
Always two there are. No more, no less.
Okay, Yoda. Then who are these guys? Or how about the Holdo maneuver? Why couldn't they do that to the Death Star? Now I know in Rise of Skywalker they give this justification that it's a 1 in a million shot. Well, if you can't hit a space station the size of a fucking moon, maybe you shouldn't be a pilot. All I'm saying is that canon matters. It's not the most important thing, but foundational events in a mythology's history should be respected if you want that mythology to succeed. Your house will never stand if you steal blocks from the foundation to build the walls. That's not how this works. And now let's address unoriginality. So previously I've compared the sequels to the prequels, which I feel is appropriate considering they're both orbiting around the original trilogy trying to capture the magic of those original films. And for all the problems of the prequels, which I've boiled down to midichlorians, Jar Jar, and shitty dialogue, there's one thing that the prequels did right, and that was being original. It's clear that The Force Awakens relied extremely heavily on A New Hope, but think about how in every movie we have some reference to the Death Star.
We're not sure how to describe a weapon of this scale.
It's another Death Star.
I wish that were the case, Major. A what now?
Miniaturized Death Star tech. It'll crack that door open like an egg.
The Emperor sent a ship from Mexico. Does that mean every ship in the fleet
Has planet-killing weapons? Of course they do.
You don't get that over-reliance on previous story beats in the prequels. I know because they're prequels and the Death Star wasn't really around, but any large story elements from the original trilogy don't show up, and they don't show up ad nauseum in the prequels. Each film continually developed the story without stagnating, and the trilogy as a whole fits seamlessly into the original narrative. And I could have forgiven it if it would have stopped after The Force Awakens, but because they kept referencing the past, it felt like we were stuck there, and I just wanted more from the story. So congratulations, you've made it to my final criticism for this trilogy, and it's a doozy. And that is that we never got to see Han, Luke, and Leia on screen together. And I think this is a criticism that every Star Wars fan can agree with. It would have been nice to have the gang back together again, but unfortunately, due to the untimely passing of Carrie Fisher, we'll never get that chance. And that's something I feel a lot of people will never forgive Disney for. I include myself in that group. I left this as my final criticism because, admittedly, it is my most unfair, although I still believe it is valid. But if you disagree with this or any of the other criticisms in this video, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. Or if you have any other criticisms that you think would work for both sides of the Star Wars spectrum, please comment down below. But remember, this was done in good faith and a little in jest, so keep it civil and enjoy the discussion. Thanks for watching. May the Force be with you, and check back later for all things Rocky.